Friday, October 13, Day 7. Friday the 13th. The date was portentous. To minimise the chance of any situation arising that might send my anxiety condition into overdrive, I had planned this trip in meticulous detail. In doing so, I'd read many accounts of the experiences of previous travellers on similar journeys. So I knew that both high and low water levels in the rivers of Europe can sometimes disrupt the best laid plans. High water levels have stopped the ships from traversing the many low bridges in their path. And low water levels could run the ships aground on sandbanks or rocks. I was determined to minimise the chances of such a disruption to our once-in-a-lifetime experience. So I poured many hours into research to determine the particular weeks in the year with the least likelihood of either high or low historical water levels. But, of course, I had to choose a cruise date more than 18 months in advance. And whether or not you believe climate change is real, our weather patterns have certainly become more unpredictable in recent years and even months. So I had done my best, but all the passengers on Viking Brewery that first week had seen the signs of things to come. We expected a disruption to our journey when the first unscheduled briefing was called. When the second one was called the previous evening, we all knew what was coming. We learned that Viking Brewery could travel no further upstream than Nuremberg. A sister ship, Viking Skadi, had been travelling downstream and could go no further than Passau. We would need to change places with the passengers on Viking Skadi in order to continue our journey upstream. This was not the end of the world, however. I'd read about other cruise companies that had simply converted a river cruise to a coach holiday when their ships could progress no further. For us, it would be a considerable inconvenience to change ships, with some loss of excursion time, but at least we would continue our cruise. So on the morning of Friday the 13th, we skipped the live glass blowing demonstration in the lounge and later attended the disembarkation briefing to learn about the logistics of the ship transfer. But that afternoon we were still able to participate in a shore excursion, a walking tour of Bamberg. We left the ship in Ziel am Main and were transported by coach to Bamberg, whilst the ship traversed a series of locks. We were deposited at the concert hall and made our way across an arm of the Regnitz river towards the old town. visitor to Bamberg will hear a lot about its special Rauchbier, often referred to as Smoky Beer. Many have tried to copy its distinctive flavour, but we were on our way to the birthplace of the authentic, original product at the Schlenterla Brewery. This is it, the birthplace. It was overrun with tourists, of course, and I tried to nip in for a quick sample, but the queue was out the door, so I had to wait until we had free time later. At the heart of Bamberg is the Domplatz, or Cathedral Square, home to some of Germany's most significant structures. These include the Bamberger Dom, an 11th century Romanesque cathedral with 4 imposing towers and booming bells. It contains the tomb of Emperor Heinrich II, who made Bamberg his home more than 1,000 years ago and built what would become one of Germany's most important ecclesiastical centres. The peals of its bells, like a signaller of the impending apocalypse, were mesmerising to the assembled crowds. Next to the cathedral, in a former Jesuit college, the Diocesan Museum houses a vast collection of ecclesiastical art and precious relics. And next to the museum is the so-called Beautiful Gate, through which we passed to enter the Alte Hofhaltung, or Old Court, a medieval building complex that served as the initial residence for Bamberg's prince-bishops, before later becoming an administrative centre housing chancellery, courtrooms and other offices. And most welcome toilets for tourists. In the late 17th century, a much more grand palace, the Neue Residenz, was built across the square to house the prince-bishops for a brief period up to 1803. There was insufficient time to experience the more than 40 magnificent rooms the palace boasts, adorned with stucco work and antique furniture. We could only pass through to its inner courtyard and onto its impressive rose garden with elevated panoramic views over the township. most iconic building in Bamberg is its town hall. According to legend, the Bishop of Bamberg did not grant the citizens any land for the construction of a town hall. So this prompted the townsfolk to ram stakes into the river Regnitz to create an artificial island on which they built the town hall they so badly wanted. Frescoes on the old town hall lend the facades a three-dimensional quality. Saturday, October 14, Day 8. It was an early start. The ship had cruised overnight from Bamberg to Nuremberg. The transfer to Viking was to be completed that day, so we were expected to have our luggage packed and outside our door by 7 a.m. with our stateroom vacated by 8 a.m. We were still able to take the scheduled shore excursion for that morning, but it was cut short and somewhat rushed to cater for the unscheduled 3-hour coach journey to Viking in Passau that afternoon. The shore excursion was Nuremberg through history, the theme being a city of extremes, from toy making to Nazi rallies. We addressed the dark history of the city first. On our way to Nuremberg Old Town, our coach driver took us past the site of Nazi Party rallies, held annually from 1933 to 1938. A 50,000 seat Congress Hall was constructed, but remained unfinished at the start of the war. Our driver stopped briefly so we could see from a distance the Stein Tribune, an imposing concrete edifice created as a podium for Hitler to make many of his infamous Nuremberg speeches, rallying support for his cause. I hadn't known at the time of our visit, but I had actually been there before, nearly 5 decades ago. In 1976, I had toured solo through Europe in a new car I had ordered from Australia but had delivered in Milan. As part of that tour, I'd gone to a motor race at a temporary circuit called the Norris Ring. In 1976, I hadn't appreciated where I was. Nuremberg was marked on my paper map as Nuremberg, so I had not associated the venue with the dark past of Nuremberg. The Norris Ring circuit winds its way around the Stein Tribune, and I happened to be seated in the southeastern section of it. It was only in researching for this video that I saw the name Norrisring on a map of Nuremberg and realised where I'd been sitting. Our driver also took us past the Palace of Justice, used as a site for the Nuremberg trials for war crimes from 1945 to 1949, and where most of the surviving Nazi commanders and officers were prosecuted. Next was the Imperial Castle of Nuremberg. It's an imposing 11th century castle complex with a royal palace and gardens and sweeping city views. We entered the castle under the Westner Gate bastion, through a defensive tunnel with skylights that allowed boiling water to be dumped on the heads of anyone not welcome.
In case there was a fire, he discovered a fire. He would, mostly at night, wave a torch right into the direction of the fire. Back then in the Middle Ages there was no...
We were just guided around a few of its courtyards, so we didn't really get to see much of it, nor did we learn much. But the toilets were very welcome. Then it was a stroll through the old town, and again I was left wondering where all the locals were.